Welcome back to the History of the Presidency, Episode 7. The History of the Presidency. A bold nation, and I brought some little sheet here for you to know about the worst and best presidents, but that's only going to go into Episode 9 and 10. We still have 4 more episodes left, so let's get into motion. So, in Presidency, the prime of presidency, how we'll be explaining it, how will we ignoring it. We'll be explaining things like billions. Don't ask me what that sound is. It's a hailstorm. Probably this is going to take it out. Just do it on this day. I'm not doing it.
I think importantism doesn't know.
That was Mike, by the way. And for another big issue of the day was violence. And by the time Franklin Delano Roosevelt died, leaving Harry Truman with tons of things. His vice president was Harry Truman. Tons of things that Harry Truman dealt with are very interesting. And I think is a very interesting figure. Harry S. Truman was a president who made his way as a Democrat president. So we can promptly blame him for the administrating attacks. A big ideas of Harry Truman's presidency is well known today and will always be well known. Probably since Franklin Roosevelt died, Harry Truman had to lead a very, very, very opinion of Franklin Roosevelt legacy.
I think that why, because he had a little speech.
Yeah, he said a speech. I wish that Franklin Roosevelt lived to this day. As the way he used his personality, but people thought he didn't have really that much of common sense. People didn't think that because really Harry Truman but he had common sense. He had the way, but he was kind of a poor man. He was in the 60s, right, for president. And pull to the way, another gigantic thing that became in his presidency is definitely the Fordal opinion air, because the things that Harry Truman launched is very interesting today. But by the time he entered his presidency, World War II extremely wasn't over. It was up to Harry Truman to find out what to do. Harry S. Truman worked with tons of things. He worked with tons of people he used.
I think his plan had failed decision of it. We had an atomic bomb, so they decided to drop the atomic bomb.
Harry S. Truman made the decision to drop bomb on Japan and forwarding 2 bombs, and including another bomb, and Truman used his thing. And Truman accepted the surrender of Japan, meaning World War II was over. No more world wars, maybe until future times. I hope there's not. The end of the events played a very big idea. The new things that were in World War II was the 2 superpowers of the world were coming up. Do you know them? Those 2 superpowers were none other than USSR, the U.S. That epic battle was called the Cold War. A war becoming a war.
The Cold War plan, the first idea, and the prospects of the ideas, but probably by a year and a half into his administration, I think he already had more.
I think the first issues of Truman's presidency is documenting the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan used in courting to get communism out of there, and they used it very succinctly.
And I think the Marshall Plan was the greatest moment of Truman's presidency.
And Truman used tons of his things to get what he wanted. If you know Truman today, you would call him the Truman Man, because the first thing of the buck stops here. The duck stops. Something stops here. Duck stops here. Really define the moments of Truman's presidency and really define the world. Is what I'm going to be able to say. Harry S. Truman utilized the presidency. He made it a president. Legacy of influence. And why Truman is this today, we cannot know. But here yes, Truman used tons of things to get what he wanted. Using the fact that Truman used a lot of things to end racial anti-ism. Civil rights begins. The president really used a lot of industry and civil rights.
I think using the civil rights of Truman's presidency.
I think I disagree. I think the Marshall Plan, but well, I don't know. Well, he can have his, but I have my opinion. Okay. Note, ask. I'm serious. And Truman used a tons of things in civil rights. To become a great president, you need to have something to deal with. And I think Truman had a lot to deal with. And he also coordinated communism conspiracy, especially came the way from the people of its restraints. He was a Democrat after all, like Franklin Roosevelt was, but just to make the way for future presidents to remember, Harry Truman is a president who does what he does. And Truman is that today, in some figures, and foreign figures, he was re-elected. He was elected for first, but he ran for election of his own. The forwarding things is interesting that he lost. Republican Thomas E. Dewey, who battled Franklin Roosevelt, fourth term, almost won the presidency, Roosevelt, but in turn ways, both were close. It wasn't really that close in the Truman election, because in thanks, and one guy said, that, don't ask, that the winner was Thomas E. Dewey, and that was unfortunate. Thomas E. Dewey's the winner, and I think that was unimaginable today. It said Dewey defeats Truman. Well, that wasn't true, but it was a misery into his great victory, especially in China. Probably 2 years into his second term, troubles start in the Chinese Revolution. He didn't know how to attain communism in the right way, and in the Korean War, it became a way. The Korean War with Truman is definitely the moments of Truman's presidency becomes important.
I think those moments really the election of great Truman. That Truman's not a great Truman.
And speaking of a great Truman, Harry S. Truman was a president who changed everything, especially under the fact that Harry S. Truman was president, and 14 ways in the veins he couldn't know how to attain communism.
It's time to go. Really, Truman's just a guy.
A guy who was a guy. Welcome back. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, and he was amazing. He was a peaceman. Dwight Eisenhower's presidency is, on the fact, one of the most interesting presidencies. Eisenhower's contained peace. A big idea of Eisenhower is really how he's a general.
I think it's pretty well seen. There's nothing else as presidency, and I don't know anything else about that.
And Eisenhower used tons of things for foreign issues, especially between the fact that Eisenhower was a very industry in the Cold War itself, because really it abolished the fact that Eisenhower was a president who helped us win blue, because we don't know today that. But Eisenhower is definitely a president who helped us win blue. His peace policies in the Cold War and his he didn't really attain communism. He was the first Republican president in 20 years. And 12 of them, over 12 of them, Franklin Roosevelt was, and 8 of them in less than 8.
Harry S. Truman was president.
I think Eisenhower's presidency is really remarkable today, and he'll always be remarkable. figure, and I think he will be a remarkable figure.
And he has to be a remarkable figure now. People like Eisenhower were presidents who made the land a land. Because you can't let them know if Eisenhower had actually just subordinated his peace ideas, especially how internally just like 2 years into his presidency, and Borden fell with a highway system. What was it called? It was like a highway system, and it was really good. I don't know what it was called, but it has to be called something. Dwight Eisenhower used that highway system to advance. He also ended the Korean War. He was a man of the greatness, and he always be it.
The highway system and ending the Korean War was the greatest moment of his presidency, probably.
And what he did in communist regimes were not involved to Eisenhower's presidency, because Eisenhower is interesting for many reasons. But Eisenhower is not interesting because he's a president of the United States. He sworn in of office, meaning Eisenhower had been president. The 4 ideas of peace is to guard the military, and he was elected for a second term. But in his second term, the things that would reverse themselves, especially between hiding the ways of elections. His vice president, Richard Nixon, would resign his presidency that Richard Nixon earned 12 years after Eisenhower, 8 years after Eisenhower's second term. But the thing that Eisenhower does is a way very uncriminal ideas. And Eisenhower continuously is losing out. He's losing out, but he is, after the death of Stalin, Eisenhower also used tons of ideas.
The ideas of nuclear weapons, kind of second term.
Peace he worked at, and peace really didn't contain in his presidency. The time he ended his presidency, he warned his greatest moment as president, and it would be the greatest. His farewell warning. The farewell warning is really the designing moments of Eisenhower's presidency, and presidency of Eisenhower.
I think Eisenhower's a great president.
And he will be a great president. I think we're going to see you soon. Thanks for watching. Already time. Well, on commercial break, we have things. Okay, and currently the election of 1960 is a more rebellion election. It's rebellion, thanks. And Richard Nixon he lost some of the vote, and John F. Kennedy won. John F. Kennedy would only be president for less than 3 years. But Kennedy changed history. How he changed history is containing a lot of ideas. He was immense. But he also had some illnesses. His illnesses of things had tons of impact on to his personality. John Kennedy really had tons of ideas. And we can't remember Kennedy today just for his ideas. We have to remember Kennedy some for more than just his ideas. We have to remember Kennedy for Kennedy. John F. Kennedy's presidency relied on tons of issues that he defined moments. His fatal things in the Cold War also rebelled him. And another big issue rebelling him was the issue of racism. And that was only until 1863 when it really became unmarketable. But I think that he had a very, very bad life to his wish.
I think John Kennedy really makes John Fitzgerald Kennedy is really on a good list. He's had a good part, and why don't we let him be on it?
And another thing that John F. Kennedy prepares very well for is how Kennedy uses things.
He uses things very successful, and I think he's using for the best.
Eventually, he worked very good a year into his presidency. Another big thing in his presidency is the Bay of Pigs. It was a Tamon failure.
Come on! A failure that becomes. The Bay of Pigs is not a good moment. His legacy today is known halfly because he's a president who is known greatly. And why? Because he is, unfortunately, a president that had prone on communism and prone himself to do something about it. And communism, the Bay of Pigs, really is the sense.
The Bay of Pigs was a failure for capitalism, but it would be overshadowed by more ideas of presidencies and forwarding ideas. The first forwarding ideas were recently of very big greatness for capitalism, probably known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, like the Soviet Union was putting missiles in Cuba,
And Kennedy was angered.
so he warned Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev to remove the missiles unless he would a nuclear attack. And for a face the agreement was settled, people know how he does the agreement. And I think why the agreement is unfortunately there is why it's right there. And I think President Kennedy was using that for this. And Khrushchev was forced to use his missiles another way. Eventually, in 1863, the last year of his presidency, he deals with communism, high up racism. Racism was a very, very, very undescribed thing, and this was so unacceptable to some people that some people thought this was just so unacceptable. Because people knew that racism is horrible, and why?
And Kennedy used it. As he watched a very violent video, he was angry.
And he used tons of his actions to get racism out of the place. He uses tons of things. And he's kind of like a man who vets. And like one of the governors was not letting the first two black people into school, and he says that to that governor, step aside. Well, that's not important. Yes, it is.
And President Kennedy used it.
He used tons of things to get into motion. And what Kennedy is known for is unfruitful. As you know, Kennedy used his father to go to Dallas for a second term. And Lee Harvey Oswald was a man mad at Kennedy. And fortunately, Oswald is very mad. Okay, after Kennedy shakes some hands, then riding in the car, Oswald shoots Kennedy in the head and kills him. And maybe an hour later, Kennedy died. That was the horriblest tragedy ever known.
I think assassination really in Dallas, Texas, is a really child's fair.
And just says, you know what, it's already commercial time. Okay. President Lyndon Johnson's presidency is perhaps one of the complicated and very, very heroic. Lyndon Johnson used his legacy to be Kennedy's legacy. He wanted to show everyone he was Kennedy. In 14 ways, his biggest accomplishment was civil rights. This would be the last year of Kennedy's presidency, or fourth year. Lyndon Johnson makes a civil rights. The civil rights bills on Lyndon Johnson's side were the greatest, and probably were the most heroic civil rights bills. So Lyndon Johnson uses them.
Civil rights were really Lyndon Johnson's greatness as a president, because he uses his presidency to get tons of things done.
and he gets it done. But how do you do it? How do you do it? And how do you do it? And that's Lyndon Johnson's strategy. How do you do it? Especially between hanging communism and do what he did. So he was elected for a term of his own in a very tough election, and he paced a way for what to do. How would Lyndon Johnson had in case is do tons of things, unfortunately, by the fast of Lyndon Johnson's personality.
Lyndon Johnson uses such things.
He also, another law's head start, the broadcasting thing, it really made it to the people. Lyndon Johnson is definitely responsible for these things, and it's a good responsible thing. Because Lyndon Johnson is a hero to the way. By the time 2 years into his term, the poor became central class, and the rich became coming down. He declared a war on poverty, meaning poverty is going to end. The fame of Lyndon Johnson is because the really bad stuff, so Lyndon Johnson's power is raised. The Johnson treatment,
I think from the biggest Vietnam War.
he stretched the Vietnam War. Even though the Vietnam War was began by Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson is. As you know, Kennedy's in Vietnam War strength had very short, but Lyndon Johnson's strength was big. He doubled the troops. But America really wasn't that close to winning a war that they couldn't win. Lyndon Johnson is last year holding many things.
Lyndon Johnson tried to end the war,
and he didn't. Sadly, a guy who shouldn't be on the way, sadly a guy who shouldn't be here is on the next presidential list.
One last thing. Lyndon Johnson was a great president and a bad president.
Richard M. Nixon's presidency is a moral legacy. It was a downfall. In the election, he campaigned between a lot of things. He was anti-communist. Richard Nixon is a real Republican. He helped the poor. But onto that way, it's a good word actually. Onto that way.
He had a downfall, really heroic.
A heroic down, meaning a very big thing that Richard Nixon did is what he did. Richard Nixon already invaded a lot of ideas. And he also had to be in power all the time. From in truth, he worked with Henry Kissinger to get the motion on the way. The way that he did it is known today, but unknown in certain ideas. Clap your hands.
Richard Nixon!
Say that. You know what you feel.
I think Richard Nixon is more famous for colonization, but he has to be more famous for something else.
Yes, he is. And pointlessly, Richard Nixon has to be. And fourthly, he helped the poor. That's amazing. He helped the poor. He helped the poor out, and we're for Republican in a good weird way.
I think he helped the poor. The idea is the animal protection laws is a good one.
Richard Nixon's good part is partly overshadowed by his bad part. The things in the Vietnam War is to tame communism, but he deals with the United States as well. The biggest thing that he deals with the United States with is the pressure. Vietnam War he deals with. So until lately, 2 years into his presidency, he ended the Vietnam War, but he kind of didn't. Really, Gerald Ford did. How he ended it was an idea of the greatness and how he did a lot of things. Richard Nixon is a president who helps us win a Fording idea, and how he did it is
how he did it, because Richard Nixon is president.
Richard Nixon, president of the United States, used tons of his powers for total bad reasons. Bigly, he also lied some. His campaign slogan was a secret plan to win the war in Vietnam. I have a way to deny that presidential election because, whoa, how much this is like a secret plan. We didn't know what the plan is. But apparently he just wanted to sound it cool. Potently, he wanted it to sound cool. Means powerfully. And first thing after first, Richard Nixon used tons of things, especially how, like, Brezhnev came to the United States. They had a very, very big talk on what can use into the next.
The Brezhnev thing really thanks to the China thing's more famous.
As you know, Richard Nixon was invited to China and had the way to discuss Cold War ideas. With Mao Zedong, they had their ideas in the Cold War. They also used tons of own ideas. And then in that year, there was tons of scandal to be called.
It was called Watergate. Watergate scandal is a very heroic scandal.
But the scandal of Watergate is on today. So Nixon again broke into the Democrats' Watergate tower, and they were to seek the pain for the election. They spied them, and really, I think the Republicans went too far on this. I think they did because I think they did that. Richard Nixon mostly had 49 states, and the Democrats had 1, making 50. That was a heroic thing. And Nixon battled it. He said, "I'm not a crook." He battled it for torturous ideas. He battled it for tons of things. Battled it for his presidency. He just battled it. He battled for it. He used tons of ideas to battle for it. He said, "I'm not a crook." He just is heroically fighting the Democrats. And the Democrats really charged him by impeaching him. They voted to vote for impeachment. But before they could, Richard Nixon on August 8th, the night of August 8th, made his famous resignation speech. And on August 9th, he resigned. These were the consequences for thinking to be the powerful Franklin Roosevelt. But the fine things that Richard Nixon had to pay the price. If he didn't pay that price and he battled it like that and he lied some more, his price would probably be a very, very consequential price. These were the presidents after Franklin Roosevelt, and they did have consequences. They thought they only had 1, but they got more, 10, 2, pointlessly just these consequences. We'll see you soon.
I can't believe it.
We'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Episode 8 is tomorrow.